Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode here on the Mindful Chiropractor. I'm excited that you're here as we're going to be discussing something that I hear all the time in chiropractic. It's something that I actually was determining my worth off. I literally thought I was a good chiropractor if I was at this number or if I was successful at this number. And because all you hear in the profession all the time, I don't care what group you're part of. I've been part of many groups. I've been part of a lot of different things. You'll always hear your numbers, your numbers, your numbers, your numbers, right? Everyone talks about what's your patient visits? How many patient visits do you see? And it always drove me in the beginning. I didn't know any better. I was coming out of chiropractor school. I was a part of a couple groups where they averaged 500 patient visits a week, right? And they that's what they stated, what they did as a group on average. And so to me, and as I got to know the best docs in that group and talk to them and get to learn them, I wanted to study them. I wanted to know everything that they did and how I can become that when I came out of school. I had the metrics down, and it was ingrained in my head that this is what success is. I have to get to this level to know I'm a solid chiropractor, that I know I'm doing amazing work, and I know that I am successful because I had such a huge vision. I remember I went to Parker University, and at the time it was called Parker College of Chiropractic. And I remember sitting down with Fabrizio Mancini one time, and I shared my vision with him. And when I was in second try, and I'll never forget that day. We had lunch, and it was one of those things where it was a pivotal moment in my life because I shared my truth of what I wanted to do for chiropractic and what I wanted to achieve for the world. And he was like, that's a huge vision. And you're only in second trimester. He's like, keep that vision strong. And so I wanted to learn how to be that way. I saw how he walked. I had, what he did and how he looked. And I looked at other chiropractors and I looked at their lifestyles. And I was like, man, I want to have that influence. I want to be able to be a person of that to that level. So I created a vision, and I had this vision. And I held true to it still to this day. And every once in a while, as I got later into the tries, he would always come up to me and say, how's that vision? And I always be like, it's getting bigger. And it was amazing because it was really getting bigger every year. And 12 years since I've graduated, it's one of the things where it continues to get bigger. And now I even have a bigger vision of what I want to achieve. But it was all these things that came down to there was numbers and numbers and numbers. Anytime you see someone marketing to chiropractors, it's all about numbers, right? And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that. You need numbers to produce, right? You need numbers to support your lifestyle. You need numbers to show your impact and more. I know all that already, right? But it was a shift in mindset that I had to see. And I had a coach who kept telling me that. She was like, you're doing great. Why do you still get hung up on the numbers? And it was something that was very frustrating for me because I just could not break through that barrier. And it took me a while. I mean, literally, I was a number junkie. It was all about numbers. But then I started to hear successful chiropractors who saw 2,000 a week, 3,000 a week, 1,500 a week, 1,000 a week. And they would talk about how their bodies were destroyed. And then I started to go, that's not going to be me. And I know some chiropractors where they had, they got massive arthritis building up in their body from all the chronic repetitive stressors, right? A lot of times, as you guys know, I always tell the public, I'm like, chiropractors have one of the worst backs. I mean, we do. I mean, it's one, and they're like, what do you mean? You guys get adjusted all the time. And when I talk to patients about this, and I'm like, remember, I always tell my patients, if I could teach you anything, the biggest thing I could teach you is that repetitive stressors is the worst. Chronic repetitive stressors is the worst thing that can be put onto your body and affect your nervous system. It's not the big things. It's the little things that get to us because it's so monumentally small, but it's consistent over time, right? And so it's one of those aspects that I had to learn how to break away from that. And I think that's something in our profession that we need to learn to break away. We need to redefine what is success for a chiropractor. And I believe there's a movement in our profession starting to happen. I know coaches that are doing that. I'm a coach. That's my whole mission. That's my whole purpose, is to get away from the numbers. Let's talk about profits. Let's talk about lifestyle. Let's talk about what you're doing for your mindset, your marriage, your relationships. Let's talk about what you're doing in your mission. How are you feeling? And mission is your soul's purpose. What is your mission of life? Why do you exist in this world? Right? It's all these things that with the Mindful Chiropractor, the podcast, we're going to discuss. And even in my coaching group, we hammer that to the T. And so it's one of those aspects of how we help the chiropractor redefine success on your terms. Because guess what? For me to break away from that disease, that subluxated mindset that I had on numbers, I had to redefine what success meant to me. And once I had the opportunity to redefine what success meant to me, my life changed. My stress went down. I wasn't so hung up on numbers anymore. Yeah, every once in a while I would evaluate them still because you got to do that. You're running your business. You need to know your numbers, all numbers, financial and on-patient visits and so forth. But there came a point in my life where I made a huge shift and I started to go, okay, what's success and what does it mean to me on my terms? What is going to make me happy? Is it going to be seeing 1,000 patients a week? I don't know. That sounds like chaos. And so then all of a sudden I defined what was the max number I wanted to see. And, I talked to some chiropractors like, well, that's kind of low. And some chiropractors like, hey, you know what? That's like some of these expert chiropractors I talked to who are very successful, they'd be saying like, that's the number you want to be around. My number was always around 300. That's it. Why? Because that's the max capacity of what, I would be comfortable with serving. It fulfilled my lifestyle. I could still work less. Okay. It was one of those things where what inspired me was the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And I started to look. And, when I looked at chiropractors who work 28, 33 hours, 50 hours a week, I was kind of going, okay, I can do that. I'll do that. I'm used to hard work, physical labor. I grew up with physical labor. I worked, with my dad laying carpet. Sometimes it was 12 hours, 3 days a week on the weekends. So I'd be helping him nonstop. And it was one of those things where seeing him work all the time taught me what I had to do to build. He taught me hard work. And so it's something it's ingrained in me. Like sometimes I'm like, I wish I could do things easier. I try to learn how to do things easier. But long story short, it's that perspective of shifting my mindset of looking at what really success was and how to get to that point. And I wanted to be learning how to do that. Because then my challenge was, okay, if I could try to get to that number, that's great. But how can I get to that number while I work less? Right? How can I get to the number, right? Because there's universal laws out there that I studied that talk about this, right? The law of least effort. What is the least amount of work to get the greatest gain possible? So I challenged myself. I said, okay, I worked with a coach. We talked about what my goals were, what I wanted to get to, my vision and my practice and my life and so forth. And I said, this is what I want to achieve. He looked at me and said, okay, when we starting? And I was like, hold on, that I can't make that change. Hold on. I'm thinking of my patients and them leaving and all this stuff. But we'll get it. I'll have a podcast about that too. But long story short, we made the shift. And within a short period of time, I cut my hours. I think I was practicing like 26 hours a week. I cut them down to 18. Okay. So that was a huge change. We're talking about 30% less of a work week, right? There's people who got upset. There's people who left. I mean, there's all these things. There's all these, what do I call them? I'm going to call them programs. That's what I like to say. But there's these people will say, if you want to have a family practice, you got to work weekends, right? And I was told that early on. And I went away from not working weekends. I wanted to have a 4-day work week, 3.5 day actually. And I did that. And that was fun. That was great. And everything worked out. Did we increase in our profits? Definitely. Did we double? Yes, we did. But we also had a 30-something percent, over 30-something percent reduction in hours in the office. Okay. And then years went on, a couple of years, and all of a sudden we had my wife was getting used to having 3-day weekends, or 4-day weekends. It was the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah. So 3-day weekends. But having a day break in the middle of the week too. So we'd only work 3 days a week. And she goes, I really like that. Is it possible? So I did my due diligence. I looked at everything. I love using Excel sheets. I go really crazy with them and I look at all the numbers, percentages, and I did all these things to see how much patients would we lose when we make that change, because it's just not going to fit their schedule anymore. And then how long would it take for us to recoup? So then we went from 18 to 14.5 hours. Crazy, right? 3-day work week. I call what I have as a boutique chiropractic office. And what ended up happening was we took a hit, just like anything else. Anytime you make a change in your office, you're going to take a hit. It just happens in our profession. But then it recalibrated and we started to attract the people who work with our schedule. And that's just something I teach chiropractors in my coaching group is when I coach with chiropractors, I always talk about how you are going to attract a person and what you sit and fit in your office and how you dictate, how you see things and so much more. It's all about where you are. And this podcast episode is not for that, but we'll dive into those things as we go on in these podcasts. But it was one of those principles that I had to learn because I trusted. I did it once and I saw it. I took about back then, I took about a 20-some% hit when I made the first shift, and I just regrouped, recentered. 3 to 4 months later, back where we were. I said, okay, great. And then Same thing happened here. I took about a 10-15% hit because it wasn't much. We're just losing one day, one half day. And all of a sudden it recalibrated within about 2 months. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, we're back. And there's a reason why that happens. And I'll talk about that and so much more later on. But it's those things that I started dictating what I wanted to have and what I wanted to see for what I want to do for me. What was success? My success was, how much do I get paid per hour? What do I make per hour? And I don't mean that in a sales thing, because there's too many times chiropractors will say, well, I'm the 7-figure chiropractor, right? I'm gonna have $1 million practice, right? And they show all these things they have, but yet when it comes to how much they really profit, they don't have enough, or they're unbelievably in debt. And I see this in entrepreneurs, because I coached entrepreneurs, and I would see some entrepreneurs where I'm like, wow, why are they coaching with me? And they're very well to do. But then as we had the dialogue and conversations, it's kind of like, okay, nope, they're not where they say they are. Interesting. Well, we have to reframe that. And so we regroup, re-strategize, and all of a sudden we can make that reality. So sometimes it happens. And so it's one of those things where you want to look at and see where is, what's your, not how much you're making from a sales perspective, but how much you're profiting, because that really what matters, right? And if you're a good business person, you know that your tax returns aren't going to be actually accurate, because you're also doing, you always want to play the tax game as best as you can. And I'll have conversations with CPAs and so forth on this podcast to help on the money side. So that way you're getting some good information from accountants who can help share this kind of information on how to play the tax game as best as you can, because it's one of those things, as I've always said, I learned at a very early age. Actually, when I was an undergrad in business school, I remember I was talking to a very well-to-do business. He was actually a teacher. He did this it was like his way of giving back. He was very successful in business. And he was like, I like to teach. It's a night class. It's 2 hours once a week. And I teach, and that's it. So I asked him, like, besides what you do in your business and all that, I'm like, what's some things that I can learn or what I need, to do that? And he said, one of the things is have a great accountant, because and he goes, don't get too caught up on how much it costs, because it's not a cost, it's an investment, because they're saving you money. And as long as they're going to save 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 times more than what you're paying them. So he's like, always make sure of that. So I wanted to study the tax game as best as I can, so I could play in the game, know the rules. And so there's the things that you can do, but at the end of the day, it's looking at, what do you make per hour profiting? And that's the number I think you should pay attention to. That's what I dictate as success. Now, you may look at me and say, well, you need high numbers to do that. Well, yes and no. Every model of practice is different, right? So there's different models and different aspects of how you practice and what you do. And yeah, it is a numbers game. Unfortunately, we're in a profession that it is a numbers game. You have to get to a certain number to yield a certain result. But it depends how you practice. Insurance, mix, cash, all those will have different avenues, different numbers, different ways to look at things. So those are different things that you have to address, to look at, to understand what it is. But what I'm trying to share with you is, before you even do all that, you have to look at what it is you want to make per hour. Okay. It's about you at the end of the day. And if you want to have fun with this, do it on sales and do it on profits. That way, so that way, where you are. And why is that important to know your numbers? As a business, you have to know your numbers, and it has to be successful for you to stay in business, right? And you're in business to make money. I mean, let's just face it. If you have a business, you're not doing this for fun. You're doing this to make money. You're trying to make a profit. You're trying to support your lifestyle, create a wealth, maybe even create a legacy to where you create generational wealth, all those kind of things. You're doing this for a specific purpose and reason. And so let's not, I used to be the guy who was like, no, it's all about my vision. It's all about this. And then I had a coach kept saying, no, your business is to support your lifestyle. So you got to remember that. And after a certain period of time, it started to ingrain in, like, it's okay. And then I read books and stuff like that to kind of help support me, because I was kind of like, wait a minute, I had limiting negative belief systems on money. I thought having money to a certain degree was not a good thing, or it's frowned upon, or people will judge me, or they'll say things to me. And at the end of the day, I was like, no, it just shows, if I have this, and it's going to show that I'm making an impact. There's a reflection to that. And so that's what I have for you today, is we need to, as a profession, get away from the numbers to a certain degree, and we need to redefine what success means. And I think taking some attributes from Tim Ferriss's book, 4-Hour Workweek, I think it's one of the great things to understand that for me personally, I rather make less, but have the freedoms of what I want to enjoy in life. Literally, as long as I can make investments for wealth, right, to increase my net worth, and at the same token, I have the freedom that I desire, and I can live I can have what I want. I'm not the type of guy who wants to have a Bentley. I don't care about having a Lamborghini. Those things mean nothing to me. I think it'd be cool to have for like a day, It really would. I think it'd be cool to have for like a day. But at the end of the day, I told my wife, if you ever wanted to have that and enjoy it, we go rent one out. And that way we go have fun with it. And then we return it and say, we're done, because there's a high expense cost to that. And I'm frugal. I'm a truck guy anyhow. I like pickup trucks. That's my car. And then maybe a small, speedy electric car. That's the only thing. That's the only thing I ever asked for. I don't want anything else. So I'm easy going with that. There's other things I like. I'd rather build generational wealth. I'd rather save my money instead of putting it in that, put it in generational wealth. Things that are going to, show interest down the road, protection and things like that. So I digress about that. So redefine your success. Look at what it is about what you make per hour rather than what it is about, how many numbers you see, because there's some people who make a ton of numbers. And I've learned this from coaches that I've worked with, where they'll talk about clients who've had, they saw a lot of numbers, but then it's what they make. And it was so drastically different. So you want to know what that is. And we'll talk more about metrics later on, but that's what I got for you today in today's podcast. Hopefully that's a good mindset shift to kind of shift gears a little bit, shift your perspective, because it's all about the mind at the end of the day. And as chiropractors, we should know that. We should be preaching that. We should be studying that. We should know that in our own elements. I'll tell you guys, one of the things that got me into the mindset world was when I went back and looked at all the things I learned in chiropractic school about neuroscience, functional neurology, and all that. And I had some of the greatest teachers. I mean, Michael Hall was one of my neurology teachers, and I know I was blessed to have him as a teacher. As much as a lot of us couldn't stand him, I did. I loved him, but it was one of those things where his knowledge. I went back and started learning those things again, because it really started to tie in to, okay, this is the part of the brain that does this. Great. Wow, that part of the brain does this. Wow, interesting. So if I take this and this, if we can do this, and we can change things. So as chiropractors, mindset's everything. And we already know 80% of all stressors start in the mind. It's most mental, emotional states. So knowing that, why aren't we as chiropractors looking there first? And that's what made me open up the door to the entrepreneur world, because I wanted to help entrepreneurs. And then eventually it came to a point where I'm like, somebody asked me, one of my clients was like, why don't you work with chiropractors? I'm shocked you don't. And I was like, dang it, you know what? I have to reconsider that. Let me look into this. And I had a lot of great success with entrepreneurs. And now I'm bringing it on to the chiropractic realm. So if you want to hear more like podcasts on the mind and things like that, where I keep it more just straightforward and things like on that aspect, check out the Mindful Experiment podcast. But this is the podcast where I'll be tailing all those things and putting it into the chiropractic profession and the chiropractic way, so we can connect the dots here and help you thrive in your life. Because right now we need more chiropractors on fire than anything else. And that's my mission with this podcast, to do that. So please check out the show notes. We got great information in there. And then also, so if you like the episode, click like, follow, subscribe, so you don't miss one. We launch one every week. And, if this resonates with you and you're looking to be interested, say, I like this, looking to potentially, I've been looking for a coach, or I'm looking for someone to mentor, or how can I double profits, work less, do that, create a system and all that great stuff. Check out the show notes. I have we can do a discovery call. And on that discovery call, it's 30 minutes, you and I, and we see, what are your vision? What are your goals? What are the things that you want to achieve in your profession, in your life? And then that way we can see if we're a good fit to help with that. So take a look at that. And then always appreciate you guys. I'll be talking to you all next week.